She fixed his car in the rain in just 3 minutes, not knowing the man standing in front of her had quietly destroyed every opportunity she ever had. Every rejection, every closed door, all led back to him. And now the same man who watched her struggle without helping was looking at her like she was the only thing he had ever wanted. But when she finds out the truth, he won't be the one in control anymore. Before we go deeper into this story, if you're watching right now, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And if stories like this pull you in, hit like, subscribe, and stay with me, because this one doesn't end the way you think. Kelechi woke up that morning with the same routine she had repeated for months: shop first, disappointment later. Her room was small, the kind that held dreams bigger than its walls could handle. A thin mattress, a cracked mirror, a single chair that had seen too many nights of overthinking. She stood in front of that mirror, tying her hair into a tight bun, eyes sharp, jaw set. Today she muttered to her reflection, "Somebody will say yes." She picked up her worn-out folder, her CV inside. Clean, perfect first-class degree in mechanical engineering. The kind of result that should open doors, the kind that didn't. By 9 a.m., she was already standing in her first office. Air conditioning too cold, receptionist too uninterested. "Do you have experience?" "I have results," they smiled politely, then rejected her politely. Second office worse, no salary, no respect, just empty promises dressed like opportunities. Third office, the same pattern, different faces, same outcome. "It's better suited for a man." That sentence again. Kelechi didn't argue this time. She just stared, not angry, not shocked, just tired. By noon, Lago's sun had turned personal. Her slippers dragged slightly against the pavement as she stepped out of the last building. For the first time that day, she didn't joke. She stopped walking. Cars passed. People moved. Life continued like nothing had happened. "First class," she whispered quietly. "For what?" For a second, just one, her shoulders dropped. But then she inhaled sharply, straightened her back, and wiped her face like she was erasing weakness itself. "No," she said under her breath. "Not today." If the world refused to open a door for her, then she would build her own. That was the exact moment everything changed. Because somewhere not far from where she stood, a decision had already been made about her. A decision she didn't know about yet. A man she had never met had already been watching. Kelechi didn't know she was being watched. Not when she adjusted her worn slippers and stepped back into the chaos of Lagos. Not when she forced her shoulders to stay straight, even as rejection still echoed in her chest. And definitely not when she turned toward that broken-down car, like it was just another random moment in a long, exhausting day. Because to her, it was just curiosity. But to someone else, it was confirmation. The car sat awkwardly by the roadside, hood open, engine exposed like a wound. And beside it stood a man in a tailored suit, rain beginning to fall lightly on his shoulders. Yet he didn't move, didn't rush, didn't even look frustrated the way most people would. He simply watched the road ahead, as if waiting for something specific to happen. And when Kelechi approached, wiping her hands on her skirt with that familiar mix of boldness and sarcasm, she didn't notice the subtle shift in his gaze, the way his attention sharpened the moment she spoke. "Good afternoon, sir," she said casually, tilting her head slightly. "Should I call a mechanic for you, or should I save both of us time and fix this myself?" The man turned slowly, eyes scanning her, not with doubt, but with interest. Deep, calculating interest that didn't match the situation at all. And for a brief second, something in Kelechi's instincts twitched, like a warning she couldn't quite name. But she ignored it because she had bigger problems than mysterious strangers with broken cars. "You?" he asked, his voice calm, almost too calm. And Kelechi smirked, placing her hand on her chest dramatically. "Yes, me. Unless you see another mechanic hiding inside the engine." There was a pause, just long enough for tension to stretch slightly, and then he stepped aside without another word, giving her access. And that alone should have been strange, because men like him didn't trust easily, didn't just step back and let strangers touch things worth more than most people's entire lives. But Kelechi didn't think about that. She simply rolled up her sleeves and got to work, her movements quick, precise, confident. like someone who had done this 1,000 times before, because she had, and within seconds she was completely focused, tuning out the rain, the noise, the man watching her, everything except the engine in front of her. What she didn't realize was that he wasn't just watching her fix the car, he was studying her. Every movement, every decision, every instinctive adjustment, like she was the answer to a question he had been asking for a long time. 3 minutes later, she stepped back, closing the hood with a soft thud, then crossed her arms with quiet satisfaction. "Try it," she said, nodding toward the driver's seat. And he didn't hesitate. He entered the car, turned the key, and the engine roared to life instantly. Smooth, perfect, as if it had never failed at all. And for the first time, his expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough. A flicker of something genuine, something impressed, something confirmed. He stepped out slowly, rain falling harder now, and looked at her again. But this time, there was no calculation in his eyes, only recognition. "Interesting," he murmured, almost to himself, and Kelechi raised a brow. "Interesting? That's all? I just performed mechanical resurrection in under 3 minutes and all I get is interesting?" That made him smile, faint but real, and that smile alone should have told her this man was not ordinary, because powerful men didn't react like that. They controlled, they dominated, they dismissed, but he observed. "What's your name?" he asked, and she answered without hesitation. "Kelechi, mechanic, engineer, future big deal, currently under construction." And instead of laughing it off, he nodded slowly, like he was filing that information somewhere important. Anum. Then came the first moment that should have changed everything. The first small crack in what she believed was just coincidence. Because instead of immediately leaving, instead of paying her and moving on like any normal person would, he lingered, his gaze drifting briefly to her bag, the edge of her CV folder slightly visible, and something unreadable passed across his face before he looked back at her. "You're not working for anyone?" he asked, and Kelechi laughed lightly, but there was a sharp edge under it. "Apparently engines in this country prefer men," she replied, shrugging, and for a fraction of a second, his jaw tightened, not in anger, but in something closer to responsibility. I see," he said quietly, and then he reached into his pocket, pulling out a thick bundle of cash, more than enough to cover not just the repair, but probably her entire month, maybe more, and he extended it toward her without a word. Kelechi looked at the money, then at him, then back at the money, and instead of taking it, she raised her hand and stepped back. "First service is free," she said simply, and this time his reaction was not subtle at all. His brows drew together slightly, genuine confusion crossing his face. "Free?" he repeated, as if the concept itself didn't make sense, and she nodded. "Yes, I build trust first. Next time, I charge you properly," and there it was, the second confirmation he didn't expect, but had been looking for. Something deeper than skill, something harder to find, something he had been testing for longer than she could imagine. He lowered the money slowly, studying her like a puzzle that had finally started to make sense. And then he did something even stranger, something that made no logical sense in that moment. He asked, "Can I see your workshop?" And Kelechi blinked, thrown off balance for the first time since they met. "My workshop?" she repeated, and he nodded, calm as ever. "Yes." She hesitated, not because she had anything to hide, but because something about this situation felt off, too intentional, too smooth, like pieces were falling into place in a way life didn't usually allow. But she shook it off quickly, because opportunity didn't knock twice, and if it did, you didn't stand there asking questions. "Fine," she said finally, picking up her bag. "But don't expect anything fancy. We are still in the before success stage." As they drove through the city, rain tapping softly against the windows, Kelechi talked, joked, filled the silence the way she always did, but the man beside her remained mostly quiet, listening, observing, absorbing every detail. And when they arrived at her small workshop, the contrast was almost unreal. Luxury stepping into struggle, power stepping into raw ambition, and yet he didn't look out of place. Not because he belonged there, but because he had already decided he did. People turned, whispers started, eyes widened, because everyone knew who he was. Everyone except the one person standing closest to him. And as Kelechi moved back into her space, picking up tools, greeting customers, slipping effortlessly into her world, he stood there watching her again. But this time, there was no doubt left in his mind. Because what she didn't know was that this wasn't the first time he had seen her. It wasn't even the second. And none of this, not the broken car, not the timing, not even this meeting had been an accident. Kelechi didn't notice the shift the moment they stepped into her workshop. Not the way conversation softened, not the way eyes followed the man behind her with a mix of shock and disbelief. Because to her, this was still her territory, her ground, the only place where she didn't have to prove anything to anyone. And she moved through it naturally, greeting customers, sliding back into unfinished work, bending over an engine like nothing extraordinary had just walked through her door. But Adekunle stood still for a moment, letting the environment speak, letting the contrast settle in, the smell of oil, the scattered tools, the rawness of ambition that hadn't yet been polished by success. And what struck him wasn't the poverty of the place, it was the energy, the undeniable presence of someone building something real from nothing, something he recognized instantly because he had once done the same. "This is where it happens," she said casually, not even looking at him, tightening a bolt with practiced ease. And he nodded slowly, more to himself than to her, because what he was seeing matched everything he had already known, everything he had already confirmed long before today. Because weeks before this moment, long before the rain, long before the broken car, her name had already appeared in front of him, not in a romantic context, not as destiny, but as data. Just another file, another CV, another applicant filtered through systems he owned, systems designed to select the best, or at least what people believed was the best. And he had been in that boardroom when her file came up, when someone casually said, "First class, but female, mechanical engineering, might not fit the operational demands." And others had nodded, not maliciously, just routinely, like people who had stopped questioning things a long time ago. And Adekunle had watched silently, fingers resting against the table, eyes scanning her profile. Something about it pulling his attention longer than usual. Not just the grades, but the consistency, the pattern, the quiet evidence of someone who didn't just survive the system, but dominated it. And yet she had been dismissed in less than a minute. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Because later that night, something had bothered him, something small but persistent, like a question that refused to leave. And instead of ignoring it, he had gone back, pulled her file again, read it more carefully, traced her applications, her rejections, the pattern forming too clearly to ignore, not incompetence, not lack of opportunity, but bias, systematic, quiet, normalized bias. And instead of correcting it immediately, instead of simply overriding decisions and offering her a position, he had done something else, something far more complicated, something that even he hadn't fully justified at the time. He had watched. He had let the system continue, had allowed her to face rejection after rejection, not because he wanted her to fail, but because he wanted to see what she would do without help, without intervention, without knowing anyone was paying attention. Because in his world, potential wasn't enough. Resilience was everything. And he had seen too many people shine under opportunity only to collapse under pressure. So he waited, observed, tested silently. And when she didn't break, when she didn't disappear, when she didn't accept defeat but instead walked into the street with nothing and still found a way to stand tall, that was when he made his move. Not by offering help directly, but by creating the moment that would reveal everything he needed to know. The car hadn't broken down by chance. And standing there now, watching her move through her workshop, hearing the way she spoke to customers, the way people responded to her, the respect she built not through status but through presence, he knew his decision had been right. But what he hadn't expected was how personal it would start to feel. "Madam Kelechi," one of her customers called out, half laughing, "this car is making noise again." Oh, and she didn't even look up. That one is not noise, it is complaint. Your car is tired of your behavior, she replied instantly, drawing laughter from the small crowd. And even Adekunle couldn't help the slight curve of his lips, because she didn't just fix machines. She controlled the space around her, turned ordinary moments into something alive, something magnetic, and that was something no CV could ever show. But not everyone in that space was impressed. Across the street, a small group of young women stood watching, their expressions tight, voices low but sharp enough to carry. "See her," one of them muttered, folding her arms, "grease everywhere, calling herself engineer." Another added, "This is what she studied for." "No man will marry this kind of woman." And the words, though quiet, landed exactly where they were meant to, because Kelechi heard them. Not clearly, not every word, but enough to recognize the tone, enough to feel the familiar sting that no amount of confidence fully erased. Her hand slowed slightly on the engine. Just for a sec, that was all it took for Adekunle to notice. He didn't speak, didn't interrupt, but his gaze shifted, sharper now, not at her, but at them. And something in his expression changed, something colder, something that reminded him of why he had built everything he had. Because people like that, voices like that, systems like that, they were everywhere, shaping outcomes long before anyone realized it. But Kelechi didn't stay in that moment long. She wiped her hands slowly, stood up, and turned toward them with a calm that didn't match the situation. Her steps steady, her expression controlled. And when she stopped in front of them, she smiled, not aggressively, not defensively, but confidently. My sisters," she said lightly. "I greet you." They exchanged looks, unsure now, and she continued, voice soft but precise. "If no man marries me, I will marry my success." Silence. And then she leaned slightly closer, just enough to make sure they heard the next part clearly. "And when your car breaks down, please bring it. I will still help you." She straightened, turned, and walked back to her workshop without waiting for a response, leaving behind not just silence, but something heavier, something harder to shake. Adekunle watched all of it, every second. And in that moment, something shifted again. Not in his understanding of her, that was already clear, but in his connection to her, because this wasn't just about potential anymore, wasn't just about identifying talent or testing resilience. This was something else, something that didn't belong in business strategies or calculated decisions. This was personal. Later, as the evening settled and the last customers drifted away, the workshop grew quieter, the noise replaced by a kind of stillness that only came after long, exhausting days. And Kelechi leaned back against her chair, stretching slightly, letting out a small breath she didn't realize she had been holding. And for the first time since morning, she allowed herself to pause, to feel, to think. "You didn't have to refuse that money," a voice said behind her, calm, familiar, and she didn't turn immediately, because she already knew who it was. "I know," she replied simply, still looking ahead. "But if I start taking shortcuts now, I won't respect what I build later." And when she finally looked at him, there was no performance in her eyes. No humor, just honesty. He held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary. "You're unusual," he said quietly. She smiled faintly. "I've been hearing that my whole life," she replied, then added, "It's not always a compliment." And something about that line, simple as it was, carried more weight than anything she had said all day. There was a pause, then he stepped closer. "Come with me tomorrow," he said. She frowned slightly. "Where? Just trust me." That word, trust. It hung between them, heavier than it should have been, because trust was not something Kelechi gave easily. Not after everything, not after the doors that had closed, the voices that had doubted, the system that had quietly pushed her aside. And yet standing there, looking at him, something inside her hesitated. Not rejection, not acceptance, just uncertainty. "Okay," she said finally, but her tone carried a question she didn't voice. He nodded once, as if that was enough. And as he turned to leave, as his car disappeared into the fading light, Kelechi sat there a little longer than usual, her mind quieter than it had been all day, but not at peace, because something about this man didn't add up. Something about the way he looked at her, The way he appeared at the exact moment she needed something to change. The way everything seemed just a little too aligned felt like more than coincidence. What she didn't know was that the truth was far worse than coincidence. Because somewhere behind everything she had struggled through, he had been there. Not helping, not stopping it, just watching. The next evening didn't feel normal. Not to Kelechi, not even from the moment she stood in front of her mirror trying to decide what version of herself to bring into a world she had never belonged to. Because this wasn't just about going somewhere new. It was about stepping into something unknown, something that felt like it could either open everything or quietly take something from her she hadn't realized she was risking. By the time Adekunle's car stopped outside her building, smooth, silent, almost too perfect against the rough edges of her environment, she had already changed her outfit twice, not because she didn't know who she was, but because for the first time in a long time, she was about to be seen in a space where people didn't usually look past appearances. When she stepped into the car, she didn't say much at first, just glanced around briefly, then settled into her seat with that familiar composure she used when she refused to let discomfort show. And Adekunle noticed, of course he did, because he noticed everything about her. The way she adjusted slightly but didn't fidget, the way she looked without staring, the way she carried herself like someone who had already decided she wouldn't shrink for anyone. And for a moment, he almost forgot why this had started the way it did. Almost. The venue was exactly what she expected, and nothing like what she had ever experienced. A private executive event, not loud, not chaotic, but controlled, expensive in a way that didn't need to prove itself. Glass walls reflecting the city lights of Lagos, soft conversations layered over quiet music. And the moment she stepped in beside him, she felt it instantly. Not hostility, not yet, but attention. Heavy, deliberate, the kind that measured before it judged. She leaned slightly toward him and whispered, "If I break something here, will they arrest me immediately or give me small time?" And he almost smiled, almost, because even here, even now, she didn't lose herself. But what she didn't see, what she couldn't see, was how the room shifted around him, how conversations paused subtly, how certain people adjusted their posture, how respect followed him like something invisible but undeniable. And more importantly, how some of those same people had been in that boardroom weeks ago. How they recognized her face not from society, but from a file they had dismissed. And the moment their eyes connected with Adekunle's, something unspoken passed between them, something that had nothing to do with coincidence. They sat, conversation starting lightly, controlled, careful, but there was a tension under it now. Something building quietly, because this wasn't just a dinner, not for him, not anymore. And when the discussion shifted, when one of the executives leaned forward slightly and asked, almost casually, "So, how did you two meet?" That was the moment everything tilted just slightly out of balance. Kelechi answered first. Of course she did, with that ease she always carried. "I fixed his car. It was embarrassing for him, but I saved the situation." A small smile on her lips, light, effortless, and a few people chuckled politely. But Adekunle didn't laugh. Not this time, because the truth behind that moment wasn't light. It wasn't random. And for the first time since this began, he hesitated. Just for a second. And Kelechi noticed. It was small, almost invisible, but she felt it. The shift in his energy, the pause that didn't belong, and something in her chest tightened slightly. Not fear, not yet, but instinct. The same instinct that had whispered to her the day before. The same feeling that something about all of this was too precise. Then one of the older men at the table spoke again, voice measured, but carrying just enough weight to change the air. "Interesting," he said slowly, eyes moving between them. "Because I remember that name." He looked directly at Kelechi now, not unkindly, but not casually either. "You applied to one of our engineering divisions recently, didn't you?" Silence. It didn't crash. It settled. Kelechi's smile faded just slightly, not gone, but no longer automatic, and she nodded slowly. "Yes," she said simply. And before she could say anything else, before she could control where this was going, the man continued. "Strong profile, very strong." He glanced at Adekunle briefly, then back at her, unfortunately not selected. Something inside her shifted, not because of the rejection, she had already lived through that, but because of the connection, because of where she was sitting, because of who she was sitting with, because of the way the pieces suddenly felt like they weren't separate anymore. Her eyes moved slowly to Adekunle. This time he didn't look away. And in that silence, in that single moment where nothing was said but everything was understood, the truth didn't arrive as a shock. It arrived as confirmation. "You knew," she said quietly, not accusing, not emotional, just certain. The table stilled completely. Adekunle held her gaze, calm, controlled, but there was no denial in his eyes, no attempt to redirect, no confusion, and that alone was enough. "I saw your file," he said finally. Simple, direct, too simple. Kelechi leaned back slightly, her mind moving faster than her expression allowed, replaying everything, the timing, the meeting, the way he had looked at her, the questions he had asked, the car, the moment, all of it aligning in a way that no longer felt like chance. "This wasn't random," she said, more to herself than to him, and he didn't interrupt. Didn't correct her, didn't soften it, because it wasn't. And now, sitting in a room full of people who had once decided she wasn't enough, beside the man who had watched that decision happen and done nothing to stop it, Kelechi felt something she hadn't expected. Not heartbreak, not even anger, but something colder, something sharper, because this wasn't just about rejection anymore. This was about control, and for the first time since she met him, she realized she had never been in control at all. The silence at that table didn't break immediately. It stretched, tightened, turned heavy in a way that made every small movement feel louder than it should have been, and Kelechi didn't rush to fill it, didn't reach for humor the way she usually would, because something inside her had already shifted. Something fundamental, something that refused to pretend this was still just a strange coincidence wrapped in opportunity. And as she sat there, eyes locked on Adekunle, the pieces didn't just connect anymore, they sharpened. Sonny, he had seen her file, he had been there when she was rejected. He had watched it happen, and instead of stepping in, instead of correcting something that was clearly wrong, he had let it continue. Let her walk out of those offices, let her stand under that sun questioning her worth. And then he appeared, not as the man who could have helped, but as the man who chose to wait. "Why?" she asked finally, her voice low, controlled, but carrying something that didn't belong in polite conversations. And this time there was no confusion in the room, no uncertainty about what she meant, because everyone sitting there understood exactly what was being asked, even if they pretended not to. Adekunle didn't answer immediately, not because he didn't have one, but because the truth wasn't something that softened easily. "I wanted to see what you would do," he said, calm as ever. But the calm felt different now, colder, more distant, and Kelechi let out a short breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "So you watched," she said, nodding slowly. "You watched me get rejected again and again just to test something?" He didn't deny it. That was what hurt the most. Across the table, someone shifted uncomfortably. Another reached for their glass just to have something to do. But Kelechi didn't look at any of them, because this wasn't about them anymore. This was about the man sitting in front of her, who had turned her struggle into an experiment. "Do you even hear yourself?" she continued, her voice rising slightly now, not loud but no longer contained. "You had the power to change one decision, just one, and instead you chose to sit back and observe like I was, what? A case study?" The word hung there, sharp, undeniable, and for the first time Adekunle's expression tightened, not dramatically, but enough to show that her words had landed exactly where they were meant to. "It wasn't about control," he said, his tone steady, but something underneath it shifted, something less certain than before. It was about understanding who you are without interference, and that might have made sense in his world, in boardrooms and strategies and systems where people were evaluated like variables. But here, in this moment, it sounded exactly like what it was. Distance disguised as logic. Kelechi leaned forward slightly, eyes unwavering. "You didn't understand me," she said quietly. "You tested me. And the difference between those two things filled the space between them like something alive. For a second, just a second, it looked like he might say something else, something more human, something that stepped out of that calculated space he had lived in for so long. But instead, he held onto it, onto that control, onto that reasoning that had always worked for him before. "And now I know," he replied, and that was when something inside Kelechi snapped into clarity, not breaking, not collapsing, but sharpening into something far more dangerous. She leaned back slowly, her expression no longer conflicted, no longer searching, just clear. "No," she said almost gently. "Now I know." The difference mattered, because suddenly this wasn't about whether he admired her, or respected her, or even cared about her. It was about the fact that he had taken away her choice before she even knew there was one, that he had controlled the conditions of her struggle and then stepped into the result like it belonged to him. She stood up, the sound of her chair moving cut through the room in a way no voice had, and every eye followed her now. Not out of curiosity, but because something real had just shifted. "Thank you for the dinner," she said, calm again, composed in a way that felt even stronger than before. "And for the lesson," she added, her gaze returning to him one last time. "Now I understand how your world works." "Kelechi," he said, her name carrying more weight now than it had before. But she didn't stop. "If you wanted to know who I am," she continued, her voice steady, not raised, not emotional, just certain, "you could have asked." She paused just long enough for that to settle, instead of building the road that broke me. This time the silence wasn't awkward, it was absolute. And as she turned and walked away, past the same people who had once dismissed her, past the same system that had quietly decided her place, she didn't feel small, she didn't feel uncertain, she didn't even feel angry in the way they expected. Because what replaced all of that was something far more powerful. Clarity. Behind her, Adekunle didn't move immediately, didn't call her name again, didn't try to stop her the way anyone else might have. Because for the first time since this began, he wasn't in control of the situation anymore. And as the door closed behind her, cutting off the room, the noise, the carefully maintained world he had built, he realized something that no strategy had prepared him for. He hadn't just tested her, he had underestimated her. And somewhere beyond that building, beyond that moment, beyond everything he thought he understood, Kelechi was already making a decision. Not about him, but about what she would do next. Kelechi didn't cry when she stepped out into the night, didn't slow down, didn't look back, even as the cool air hit her face and the city lights blurred slightly in her vision. Because whatever had cracked inside her back in that room had already settled into something else, something quieter, something more dangerous than anger. And as she walked past the polished glass buildings, past the same kind of places that had once rejected her without a second thought, she realized something that changed everything. She had been trying to prove herself to a system that never intended to see her in the first place. By the time she reached home, her room felt smaller than usual, not because it had changed, but because she had, and she stood in front of that same cracked mirror again, staring at her reflection like she was meeting a different version of herself, one that wasn't asking for permission anymore. "You tested me," she whispered, her voice steady. "Not broken. Now it's my turn." The next morning, nothing about her routine looked different on the outside. She still tied her hair the same way, still walked into her workshop, still greeted customers with that familiar mix of humor and confidence. But underneath it, everything had shifted, because now every conversation, every interaction, every small detail was being processed differently. Not just as survival, but as strategy. She started noticing patterns she had ignored before. The type of clients who came in with certain cars, the complaints they mentioned casually, the connections between suppliers, the inefficiencies in parts distribution, the gaps in local manufacturing, things that had always been there, but had never mattered until now. And slowly, quietly, she began documenting everything, scribbling notes when no one was watching, asking questions that sounded casual but weren't, piecing together something bigger than a workshop, something that didn't rely on approval from anyone sitting in a boardroom. But information alone wasn't enough. She needed proof. Not just of her capability, but of the system that had dismissed her. The same system Adekunle had chosen not to interrupt. And that meant going deeper, deeper than comfort, deeper than safety. And for the first time since she started this journey, she reached out to someone, not for help, but for access. Adaora, the one person who had stepped into her life without conditions, without tests, without hidden motives. When Adaora answered her call, there was no hesitation in her voice, just concern. Kelechi, are you okay? And for a second, just a second, Kelechi felt the weight of everything she hadn't said, but she didn't let it slow her down. I need information, she replied, straight to the point. And Adaora didn't ask why, didn't question her intention. She simply listened as Kelechi explained what she needed. Legal filings, corporate structures, recruitment policies, the kind of documents that didn't exist on the surface but shaped everything underneath it. Within days, the picture became clearer, sharper, harder to ignore. The companies that had rejected her weren't isolated decisions. They were connected, not directly, not in ways that would raise immediate suspicion, but through shared investors, shared leadership, shared influence, all roads leading back to the same place, the same network, the same man. Adekunle. And suddenly what had felt like a series of unfortunate rejections started to look like something else entirely. Not intentional sabotage, but something just as damaging, systemic neglect shaped by power, reinforced by silence, and validated by people who never had to question it. Kelechi didn't rush to confront him again. Not this time, because now she understood something she hadn't before. Emotions alone wouldn't change anything. Not in his world, not in that system. And if she wanted to be heard, she couldn't just speak. She had to present something undeniable. So she worked longer hours, took on more clients, pushed herself harder than before, not out of desperation, but out of precision. Every repair becoming part of a larger narrative, every satisfied customer another piece of evidence, every small success building towards something that couldn't be dismissed as luck or attitude. At night, when the workshop was empty and the noise had faded, she stayed behind, reviewing everything she had gathered, refining her thoughts, shaping her argument. Because this wasn't just about proving she was good enough. That was already done. This was about exposing why she had been considered not enough in the first place. And the more she worked, the clearer her goal became. Not revenge, not even validation, but correction. Meanwhile, across the city, Adekunle felt it. Not directly, not in a way he could measure, but something had shifted. Something about the silence she left behind, the absence of her voice, the absence of her presence, and for the first time in a long time, control didn't feel as complete as it used to. He found himself going back to her file again, not out of curiosity this time, but something closer to reflection, replaying their conversation, her words, the way she had looked at him when she said, "You built the road that broke me," and no matter how he framed it, no matter how he justified his decision, that line didn't leave. Because deep down, he knew she was right. And somewhere between his world of calculated decisions and her world of earned survival, a collision was coming, not quiet, not controlled, but public, undeniable, and impossible to ignore. Kelechi wasn't just preparing to face him again. She was preparing to face everything he represented, and this time, she wouldn't be the one being evaluated. The day of the summit arrived without noise, without warning, just another Lagos morning on the surface. But underneath it carried something heavier, something inevitable. Because this wasn't just a business event anymore. It was a stage, and whether they realized it or not, everyone in that room was about to witness something they couldn't unsee. Aeon, the hall was filled with executives, investors, media, polished conversations layered over quiet tension, and at the center of it all stood Adekunle, composed as always, delivering his speech with the same precision that had built his empire, talking about innovation, about growth, about the future of local manufacturing, his voice steady, his presence controlled. But even as he spoke, something about him wasn't fully there. Not entirely, because part of his attention was somewhere else, somewhere he couldn't ignore. Then the doors opened. It wasn't dramatic. No announcement, no music. Just a subtle shift in the room as heads turned, conversation slowed, and Kelechi walked in. She didn't rush, didn't hesitate, didn't try to belong. She simply entered like someone who had already decided she did. For a brief moment, the entire room recalibrated, because this was not the version of her they expected. Not the roadside mechanic, not the girl dismissed from interviews, but something sharper, something grounded in certainty. And as her eyes met Adekunle's across the room, there was no confusion left between them. No unanswered questions, only clarity. He stopped speaking. Not because he had to, but because he chose to. Because he knew why she was there. And for the first time since all of this began, he didn't try to control the moment. He stepped back slightly and let it happen. Kelechi moved forward, each step steady, measured, the quiet sound of her heels against the floor, carrying further than it should have. And when she reached the front, when every eye in that room had settled on her, she didn't look at the crowd first. She looked at him. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm, clear, not loud but strong enough to cut through the space. And then she turned to face the room, not as someone asking to be heard, but as someone who already was. "I'm not here for an invitation," she continued, "and I'm not here for permission." A ripple moved through the audience, subtle but undeniable. "I'm here because I was already part of this system. You just didn't notice." Silence followed, not empty, but focused. Kelechi didn't rush. She let it settle. Then she began. She spoke about qualifications dismissed in seconds, about decisions made behind closed doors, about patterns that didn't look like bias when you saw them once, but became impossible to ignore when you saw them repeated. And as she talked, she didn't raise her voice, didn't accuse recklessly. She presented step by step, detail by detail, every piece she had gathered, every connection she had traced, every quiet truth that had been hidden behind polite language and corporate structure. And with each word, the room shifted further, discomfort replacing confidence, awareness replacing assumption. Then she turned slightly, not to the audience, to him. "You said you wanted to understand who I am," she said, her gaze steady, unwavering. "So you watched me struggle. No denial, no interruption." Adekunle held her gaze. "And maybe in your world," she continued, "that made sense. Maybe testing people from a distance feels like strategy. Maybe letting things break before you fix them feels like control." Her voice didn't shake. "But where I come from, that's not leadership." The word landed, harder than anything she had said before. "That's distance." A pause, long enough for everyone to feel it. "You didn't just observe a system," she added. "You allowed it." The room didn't move, didn't breathe, because now it wasn't just about her story. It was about all of them, about the roles they had played without realizing, or worse, without caring. Kelechi took one step back, not retreating, just repositioning, her voice softening slightly but losing none of its weight. "I don't need a job from this system anymore," she said, "and I don't need validation from people who never intended to see me." She glanced briefly at the audience, then back at him. "But I needed you to see this." And to another pause, "Not me." Her eyes didn't leave his. The system. For the first time, something in Adekunle's expression broke through. Not dramatically, not visibly to everyone, but enough to show that what she had done wasn't just confrontation, it was impact. Because she hadn't attacked him. She had exposed something he could no longer ignore. The silence stretched again, but this time it was different. Not heavy, not tense, but transforming. Because something had shifted in that room, something irreversible. Kelechi stepped away from the center slowly, not rushed, not uncertain, just finished. Because she hadn't come to argue, hadn't come to win, she had come to reveal, and she had done exactly that. And as she walked past him, just close enough for only him to hear, she said quietly, "You wanted to know who I am." A brief pause. "Now you do." She didn't wait for a response. And I didn't look back, because this time, she wasn't the one being judged anymore. The silence that followed her words didn't end when she walked away. It stayed, settled into the room like something that refused to leave. And for the first time in a space built on control and certainty, no one moved to immediately fix it, no one rushed to speak over it, because what Kelechi had done couldn't be smoothed out with polite language or redirected into a safer conversation. It had already landed too deeply. Adekunle stood where she left him, still composed on the surface. But something underneath had shifted in a way that even he couldn't ignore anymore. Because this wasn't a negotiation. It wasn't a business problem. It was something far more personal and far more difficult to correct. He didn't go after her immediately. Not because he didn't want to, but because for the first time, he understood that this wasn't something he could resolve with presence alone. Days passed, but the ripple didn't fade. Inside his company, conversations changed, not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. Enough for people to start asking questions they had never asked before, enough for processes to be reviewed, enough for decisions to be revisited. And at the center of it all was a truth no one could deny anymore. Something had been overlooked, not by accident, but by habit. And habit, when left unchallenged, became structure. Meanwhile, Kelechi didn't wait to see what would happen. She didn't sit around hoping the system would correct itself, didn't watch from a distance to see if change would come, because she had already moved past that stage, and back in her workshop, everything felt different again. Not easier, not magically transformed, but clearer, sharper, more intentional. Because now she wasn't just building something for survival, she was building something that had purpose behind it, something that stood independently of approval. Her customers still came, still laughed, still trusted her, but now there was something else, something new, recognition. Not the kind that came from media or attention, but the kind that came from consistency, from presence, from proof. And slowly, her workshop grew, not overnight, not dramatically, but steadily, the way real things did. Then one afternoon, as the sun settled into that familiar Lagos heat, a car pulled up outside her shop. Not broken this time, not hesitant, just deliberate. She didn't need to look to know who it was. She wiped her hands slowly, turned, and there he was. Adekunle stepped out, not with the same quiet control as before, not with the same certainty, but something closer to humility, something she hadn't seen in him yet. And for a moment, neither of them spoke. Not because there was nothing to say, but because this time, words mattered more. "I was wrong," he said finally, direct, without performance, without justification, and she didn't respond immediately, didn't rush to accept it or reject it. She simply watched him, waiting, because this wasn't about hearing what sounded right. It was about understanding what had changed. "I thought I was testing strength," he continued, his voice steady, but carrying something heavier now. "But I was standing at a distance from something I should have stepped into." He paused, not searching for words, but choosing them carefully. "And you were right, that's not leadership." The silence between them wasn't tense this time. It was honest. Kelechi exhaled softly, not out of relief, not out of forgiveness, just acknowledgement. "You can't undo what happened," she said, her voice calm, not harsh, not soft, just real. And he nodded immediately. "I know," he replied, and for the first time there was no attempt to argue with that truth. "But you can choose what happens next." That was the difference. Not apology. Action. He looked at her, not as someone observing anymore, not as someone evaluating, but as someone finally seeing her fully, without filters, without tests. "I want to build something different," he said. "Not for you, with you." That word mattered. With. Kelechi didn't answer right away. She glanced around her workshop, at the tools, the cars, the small space that had carried her through everything, and for a moment, she saw both versions of her life at once. The one she had fought through alone, and the one that could expand into something bigger, not by replacing what she had built, but by growing it. When she looked back at him, her expression had changed slightly. Not softened, not surrendered, but open in a way that still protected her ground. "I don't need saving," she said. "I know," he replied, "and I won't be tested again." A small pause. Never. That was enough. Not perfect, not complete, but real. Weeks later, the change became visible. Not just in conversations or intentions, but in action. Policies shifted, recruitment restructured, opportunities opened in ways that hadn't existed before. And at the center of it, not as a symbol, not as a token, but as a force, was Kelechi. Not because she had been chosen, but because she had chosen herself first. The workshop didn't disappear. It evolved, expanded into something larger, something that carried her name not as decoration, but as proof. Proof that skill, persistence, and refusal to shrink could create something no system could ignore. And somewhere along that journey, between conflict and correction, between distance and understanding, something else found its place again. Not rushed, not assumed, but rebuilt. Because this was never just about love, it was about truth. And in the end, that was the only thing that lasted. Before you go, I'm curious, where are you watching this story from today? And if this journey pulled you in even a little, you already know what to do. Like, subscribe, and stay close. Because the next story might hit even deeper than this one.